in Mago Reddit. Today's story is
My sister excluded me from her wedding with lies, but when I exposed her darkest secrets, her perfect life fell apart in 24 hours and she ended up in hospital. I have always valued the truth, even when it is painful. There is nothing I hate more than lies. Often, big problems can be avoided simply by being honest. I have repeated this to my family countless times, but it seems that my words fall on deaf ears. Now they have brought out the worst in me. Should I apologize? I don't think so. However, they all insist that I could have handled the situation better. I asked them what I should have done, but no one gave me any concrete answers. Instead of being indifferent to their lack of help, I decided to seek the opinion of someone outside the family. You can be as direct as you think necessary. Tell me what I could have done better, and I promise not to get upset. In fact, it will help me grow as a person. Enough preamble, here's what you need to know. Last night, I had a terrible public argument with my parents over dessert. But it wasn't just about the dessert itself. It was about their support for my sister's irresponsible attitude. She was the one who ordered the wrong dessert and then took it out on the waitress. Everyone at the table clearly heard her ask for the strawberry dessert, but when the waitress brought it to her, she exploded and demanded that they serve her the vanilla one. When the waitress tried to remind her that she had requested the strawberry one, she called the manager. I offered her my vanilla dessert, but pointed out that she had made a mistake. She refused to admit it and continued to make a fuss. I should mention that we were at a table with 16 relatives. Everyone seemed embarrassed or pretended not to notice the situation. When the manager arrived, my sister demanded that the waitress be fired, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I told my sister that she had already ruined dinner for everyone. All night long, she had talked about nothing but her wedding, and she wouldn't let anyone change the subject. That was when she had the audacity to burst into tears and say that I was being cruel. According to her, all she wanted was a day when she wasn't overshadowed by me. What a revelation, now I understand. That's why she lied about the lost invitation, isn't it? That's why she kept waiting for my invitation to her wedding while she continued lying. I told her that lying didn't suit her. My mother gave me a look and shook her head, silently indicating that I should keep quiet. Meanwhile, my father scolded me and shook his head in disappointment, which only made me laugh and make me even angrier with her. I told her that I needed to hear the truth. Not only was she behaving like a nasty person, but she was also a liar who was about to get a poor employee fired for her own mistake. Then I told the manager that it was no longer necessary for him to stay there because my sister had made a mistake. My sister was completely speechless, as were my parents. She looked like she wanted to say something, but instead she got up and left crying. Everyone was silent after that. I knew all eyes were on me, but I didn't care. I said what many were thinking, that she was behaving inappropriately without justification. My mother broke the silence and asked me to go and apologize to my sister because I had crossed a line. I replied that I wouldn't apologize in a million years and continued enjoying my dessert. Seeing that I had no intention of apologizing, my father ordered me to leave. He said there was no place for my negativity when we were celebrating my sister's new house. At that moment, my brother-in-law returned. He had been taking a phone call when it all happened. He asked where my sister was, and my mother sarcastically suggested he ask me. I laughed and told him she was in the bathroom crying because she's a spoiled brat who thinks the world revolves around her. I didn't even give him time to respond. I left money to pay for my meal and looked for the waitress who had served us. I gave her a generous tip for putting up with my family and left. I couldn't bear the situation any longer. My patience had reached its limit. I wasn't surprised when my sister sent me a message later informing me that I wasn't invited to the wedding. Funny, because I was pretty sure I had never been invited in the first place. This was after she coincidentally forgot to send me an invitation months before. At first, I didn't think I would need one, being her sister. For my wedding, I simply included my immediate family members, and they walked in without a formal invitation. I only realized there was a problem when I found my mother's invitation. So I asked her, and she replied with feigned surprise, "Didn't you get yours?" She then explained that, as my sister's wedding would be a high-profile event, she needed an invitation to avoid confusion. She said she might have forgotten to send it. This was 2 months ago, and I still haven't received an invitation. I started to worry that I wouldn't be allowed into the wedding. So I confronted my sister about it, and she assured me it had been a mistake. She explained that she had printed the other invitations in bulk, so she would have to place a special order for mine. I started to get suspicious when I didn't receive any updates. It occurred to me that maybe my sister didn't want me there and was using this as an excuse to keep me away. My suspicion grew when she finally sent me an invitation without the option of bringing a guest. So I asked her where the invitation for my husband was, and she said she had made a mistake, so I had to return the invitation to her. Her wedding is next week, and I need that invitation if I want to attend. But it seems that my sister just doesn't want me to participate, and that bothers me deeply. I confronted her and asked if I had done something to offend her, and she just replied that I was being dramatic and that I was stressing her out. So I consulted with my mother, and she said I was overreacting. The problem is that I can sense that something is not right, and I haven't been able to shake that feeling. What happened today was the perfect opportunity for my sister to exclude me from her wedding. I shouldn't have to worry so much about my own sister's invitation. She's a big liar, she showed today. But her parents always take her side. Now I'm getting criticism from them, especially from my mother. Also, she mentioned something very interesting recently. She said, "This is why your sister was hesitant about inviting you to the wedding. You always steal the spotlight from her." I asked her what she meant by that. She explained that it was because I got married first, even though I am 2 years younger than my sister. It is true that I got married a few months ago, but it was because I wanted a small wedding. Why is it a problem that I got married first, even though I am younger? Mom said I didn't pick up on my sister's signals, that she wanted to get married first, and that she still feels a lot of pressure to have a spectacular wedding because she thinks she's competing with me. One thing about my mother is that she talks without thinking. And now she has confirmed my suspicions. I think I need to talk to my sister. I promise to be nicer this time. I think last time my anger got the better of me. Update 1. Talk about making things worse. The dispute between my sister and I has somehow intensified twofold in the last few days. I can't believe I tried to be the mature person only for her to disrespect me, metaphorically speaking. She called me a jealous and malicious person, and now I'm about to show her who the jealous and malicious person really is. She has pushed me so far beyond the limits that now I am not going to let her have a quiet wedding. I know this represents a radical change from what I mentioned in my previous post, but it is important to clarify that, before I said such a thing, I really tried to have a civilized conversation with her. I really wanted to resolve things and understand if she genuinely felt bad in any way because I got married first. I was willing to listen to her and even apologize for my behavior at the restaurant. But instead of taking a moment to be honest with me, she looked at me with an expression of contempt and asked why I would make her feel jealous. Then, arrogantly, she stated that her future husband was much more attractive and wealthy than mine, that their wedding would be a high-profile event because her fiancé had political contacts in the city, and that her life was absolutely perfect. So she didn't mind that I had married first? How convenient. It's funny that she should say that because, although my mother talks too much, she is not a liar. She always tells the truth, and if she had told me that my sister was jealous, then it was because it was true. And I could see it for myself. Observing her body language, I realized that she avoided looking me in the eye and that her tone of voice was higher than normal, clear signs that my sister was lying to herself. So I asked her if she was trying to convince me or herself. After all, if her fiancé was so wonderful, had she forgotten that she once told me that she hadn't felt any special connection when they first started dating? She rolled her eyes and told me that, with time, the connection emerged. And then I asked her if it was the same connection she had with Romeo, her ex-boyfriend, fictitious name, and then she could barely keep looking at me. When Romeo betrayed her after years of relationship, she became a complete mess and swore she would not date anyone again for a long time. And then, suddenly, her current fiancé appeared, and as if by magic, from one day to the next, she was eager to get married. I know her perfectly, and I know that she cannot tolerate feeling like a failure. Perhaps he had simply been a momentary consolation, even if he now insisted that he was the love of her life. However, the way her expression changed when I mentioned Romeo made me think that maybe this wedding wasn't for love, but for revenge. She became defensive and asked me to stay out of her love life, that it wasn't her fault that I was so boring. Apparently, according to her, I had never really lived. The only thing I excelled at was getting good grades and being in a relationship with the same man since my last year of high school. Clearly, she couldn't understand the idea that a person could fall in love more than once. And then, with a mocking smile, she asked me what I knew about romance, adding that my own marriage was monotonous. That was when she crossed the line. It was bad enough that she criticized my marriage. My husband and I are completely happy with our life, and we enjoy the simple things. But she just laughed and told me that in the family we were all called the old marriage, because according to her, the spark in my relationship had long since died out. I couldn't bear it anymore. I left her house furious. She wants to call me boring? Well, I'm going to show her what really is boring. If she wants to talk about my marriage behind my back, then maybe the whole family needs to know what she really thinks about them. My anger was so intense that I just sent screenshots of some of our private conversations to everyone. If I've crossed the line, it can't be helped, and I have no regrets. She deserves it for being a liar, for being a hypocrite, and for attacking me like that. Now she'll get to know my worst side. She'd better be prepared, because the storm is just beginning. Update 2. Nothing is as chaotic as the drama surrounding a wedding. I think I have just started a monumental conflict in my family. First, by exposing my sister at the restaurant, and then by spreading those messages, any hope of reconciliation with her has completely vanished. That's what I call destroying bridges, but it's a well-destroyed bridge. What's more, my parents are furious with me, and of course they've taken her side. But she provoked me. What was I supposed to do? She's been unbearable to me. First she excluded me from the wedding, and then she lied to me about it. Then she had the audacity to criticize my marriage. Well, these are the consequences of her own actions. And to begin with, I didn't even know this, but apparently, after my sister returned from the bathroom that night at dinner, she took her anger out on everyone. She blamed the family for not defending her against me and called them cowards. Some relatives were so offended by her attitude that they canceled their attendance, considering her the most unpleasant person of the century. While all this was going on, I was facing an even more serious situation because of what I had done. Maybe I shouldn't have sent those messages to her in-laws. But what other alternative did I have? She had been talking negatively about them to me for months, even though I wasn't even invited to the wedding. Isn't that strange? Over the last month, almost every other day she would criticize her in-laws, calling them arrogant, impossible to please, and a nightmare to deal with. She even went so far as to express her desire to move to another city with her husband just to get away from her meddling in-laws. The irony is that she criticized them for being too wealthy and for the social awkwardness of some of them. I remember that when she made that comment, I even asked her if she wasn't exaggerating, since after all they were her in-laws. I tried to persuade her to give them a chance and to make an effort to establish a good relationship with them, but she replied that she wasn't looking for advice, that she just needed to let off steam. Well, I took those messages and sent them to the few in-laws I had on social media. And then I waited for absolute chaos. It wasn't long before my sister started flooding my phone with messages, demanding to know what I had done. She told me that I had probably ruined her wedding because I am selfish and that she hated me. Then, in a fit of rage, she told me she wished I would have a miserable marriage with my boring husband who only knows how to talk about science, and that we would have a child just as boring. Finally, she added that she hoped the children would inherit my appearance, because my husband's only quality is his intelligence. Wow, hadn't she learned anything about talking badly about people? When she said that, I replied that she deserved everything that was happening to her and that I hoped her fiancé would leave her. He deserves someone who truly loves him, because she could fool everyone else, but not me. She doesn't love him. She loves his money and what he can provide her with. I had kept this feeling to myself for so long, trying to be an understanding sister, but now they have unleashed it. And let me tell you, it feels very satisfying to put my sister in her place. For her, however, it was not at all rewarding. Soon after, my mother called me in distress. She informed me that guests were canceling their attendance and that all the money invested in my sister's wedding could end up being a waste. Our parents financed both weddings. They had a considerable budget for mine, but I used most of the money to make the down payment on our house. For my sister's wedding, however, they spared no expense. But now, all that effort could have been in vain. Half of the guest list belonged to her fiancé's circle, and it turned out that she had made some horrible comments about that half. So, naturally, they no longer wished to attend the wedding. I never would have imagined that this would end with such a denouement. I thought she would face a minor inconvenience, but to lose almost half of her guests, that is really surprising. And the wedding itself, surprisingly, it is still on. Despite everything that has happened, and the pressure from her family, her fiancé has not canceled the ceremony. Instead, he posted a message on social media asking for respect for their privacy and stating that if anyone didn't have something positive to say, they should keep quiet. There's no doubt that he loves her, but I don't think she feels the same about him. How could she, when she finds faults in every member of his family? Look, my in-laws are not perfect, but I have never spent so much time criticizing their faults. This is clearly a negative attitude, and honestly I am so satisfied to have endured all their unbearable outbursts because they finally became an incredibly effective resource. Update 3. Well, as I write this, I'm in the hospital. The last 24 hours have been like something out of a movie. I knew I was right about my sister. I saw the signs, but I didn't look closely enough. If I had been more determined to investigate, I would have uncovered this mess before it got completely out of hand. But how did I end up in hospital? And what happened to my sister's wedding? To begin with, my sister's wedding never even started. There were only a few posts from the venue that morning on my mother's social media. But when the ceremony was due to begin, my mother called me in desperation, asking if I had spoken to my sister. Apparently, my sister had disappeared without a trace and had not shown up at her own wedding. Her bridesmaids had been looking for her all morning, but only alerted my parents minutes before the ceremony was due to begin. Most worryingly, her car was not at the hotel where she had spent the night. I told my mother that I hadn't spoken to her for days, so I was the last person she should have consulted. But she begged me to try to think of anywhere my sister might have gone. She was completely distraught, so reluctantly I agreed to go to the wedding venue. When I arrived, half the guests were already there and panic was starting to set in. We called everyone we could think of, but got no response, until, unexpectedly, my mother received a call from the hospital. My sister had been admitted the night before. She needed urgent surgery and required the presence of her next of kin. This is where the situation became even stranger. She had not designated her fiancé as her emergency contact, but her parents. Why? That was already quite unusual, but at that moment, we didn't have time to analyze it. We hurried to the hospital, and upon arrival, Mom had to sign numerous documents before the emergency surgery could begin. A few hours later, the doctor took my mother and my sister's fiancé aside to talk to them. When they returned, their faces reflected devastation, but they refused to reveal to the others what was happening. I had grown tired of trying to get the truth out of my mother and was about to leave when my sister's ex-boyfriend, Romeo, burst into the hospital. He came in like a wild force, straight towards my sister's fiancé, and he hit him. Between blows, he shouted that if anything happened to my sister, it would be his responsibility. He accused him of being a murderer for having forced her to proceed with the termination. We managed to separate them and demanded to know what he was talking about. We were all completely confused. And then he revealed the most shocking information of all. My sister had had a relationship with her ex and had become pregnant. There was a strong possibility that the baby was not his, and if it wasn't, it would become apparent when the baby was born. To avoid ruining her marriage before it had even begun, she had told her ex that she would terminate the pregnancy. It was at that moment that my sister's fiancé stepped in to correct the story. According to what the doctors had told him, my sister had suffered a miscarriage due to complications and needed immediate surgery because her entire body was being affected. The doctors also considered preventing her from conceiving in the future because the damage to her body was severe. But Romeo didn't believe a word of it. He insisted that it wasn't a miscarriage, but a failed attempt to, make sure the pregnancy ended. He claimed that she had told him about her plans at the beginning of the week, but he had been out of town. By the time he returned, it was too late. I don't even know what to think at the moment. My sister was unfaithful to her fiancé. She got pregnant, and now she's in hospital because of it. Their wedding wasn't even held, and now her two suitors are physically fighting over her in a hospital. At least I know I have no responsibility in this. Update 4. Part of me feels sorry for my sister, but another part of me thinks she brought this situation on herself. She was the one who cheated on her fiancé, got pregnant, and then tried, unsuccessfully, to solve the problem. Now, everyone knows what she did because her ex showed up at the hospital and revealed everything. What happened next was predictable. Her fiancé called off the wedding because she had betrayed him without consideration. And that was after he was still willing to marry her despite all the horrible comments she made about his family. But anyway, he lost a good person, just like that, suddenly. And honestly, I think it was for the best. When she regained consciousness in the hospital, she refused to see me because she was still angry with me for having divulged her messages. She said that I had made her life worse when she was already dealing with what had happened with the baby. She told me that she could never trust me, because if she had ever confided her secret to me, I would have revealed it anyway. Well, that's her opinion, and there's nothing I can do to change it. When I left the hospital, I never went back to visit her. I later found out that Romeo went back to her and they started living together. I hardly ever saw her around town, and when I did, she wouldn't even look at me or say a word to me. It wasn't long before I heard that she had been admitted to a women's shelter because she was experiencing domestic violence. I wonder if her miscarriage was also Romeo's fault. I was angrier with my parents than anyone else. They never stood by me when my sister excluded me from the wedding, but as soon as she disappeared, they expected me to cooperate. And then they had the audacity to ask me to help them get the money back from the wedding venue because they had invested a fortune in a ceremony that never took place. Why would I want to help them after how they treated me? I told them they should sort it out for themselves and that I didn't want to get involved in their problem. But unfortunately, they kept insisting, and that made me furious. So I decided to show them what my anger can really achieve. You see, my job means I get to know most of the business owners in town, especially the restaurant owners. And it turns out that I have an excellent friendship with the owners of my family's favorite establishments. They owed me a few favors, and when I explained the situation to them, they were more than willing to ban my parents from entering. I did it out of pure meanness. A few days later, my mother was furious because she was turned away at 2 consecutive restaurants. She called me, demanding to know what was going on, and I was completely honest, it was me. I explained that I frequent those places and that the last thing I want is to run into them. She became enraged, demanding that I stop behaving like a child. He asked me, "How can you take over restaurants because of a small family conflict?" I laughed and replied, "Why don't you ask your daughter to get you a table?" "Oh, wait, you can't, because she never married the man with so much influence." I don't feel guilty about my parents, not at all, nor about my sister. She betrayed her fiancé, who seemed like a good match for her, just to get back together with her ex. The same ex who was unfaithful to her, and the same ex who physically assaulted her. When I reflect on all this, I appreciate having a peaceful marriage with a predictable husband. For me, there is nothing better than stability. I don't want to experience a situation like my sister's in the hospital. If that's her idea of fun, I'd rather take something bitter. Update 5. Everyone has asked me for an update on my life, my family, and everything related to my story. My life is still very quiet. To illustrate this, I will mention that 2 weekends ago, we went on a romantic getaway where we visited museums. We also walked on the beach and enjoyed romantic dinners, but for my sister, that would be a terrible experience. However, for us it is what we enjoy, so it has not been boring at all. And most importantly, there was no ex-boyfriend beating up my husband because of a pregnancy. I have no information regarding my sister. She decided to leave the city over a year ago and start over somewhere else. I also know that she did it because of Romeo because, despite the restraining order, he broke it a couple of times. We still don't communicate, and that's what affects me the most. I mention this because if she gets married again, she probably won't invite me, and I'm not sure if I'll be lucky enough to be there when it all falls apart like last time. I'd hate to miss the show, and since my sister says I have a boring life, she should invite me along to liven it up. But joking aside, I'm fine with us not talking to each other. The same thing happens with my parents, who have to leave the city every time they want to go to a restaurant. However, this has been beneficial for the rest of the family, as I have been told. Because after the last family reunion, nobody wants to go out to dinner with them, and this is the best excuse. I wasn't exaggerating when I said that everyone experienced an awkward moment with my sister and my parents.